7 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and call the Nottingham Planning Board Wednesday, March 8th, 2023 meeting to order. Before we begin, I'll go around the room, starting on my right, and have everybody introduce themselves, please.
Robert Davies, alternate.
Gary Anderson.
John Moore, Ian McKinnon.
Edward Veal.
Susan Mooney.
Sherry Sandler.
Charlene Anderson.
Larry Haney, SRPC.
And we have a full board tonight, so Mr. Davies will be participating as an alternate, but non-voting. We're gonna go ahead and take the items on the agenda in order. The first item up is case number 23-001-SIT Dandelion Forest Farm. Application from Lynn Avon requesting a conventional site plan review so that the business Dandelion Forest Farm is able to not only farm the land, but also host 8 to 12 events, brunches, dinners, and/or educational workshops per year. Property is located at 311 Stage Road in Nottingham and identified as tax map 18, lot number 19. Is there anybody here for the applicant? Yeah. You can come up to the table, just identify yourselves, please, and then just give us a quick synopsis or summary of what you're looking to do.
Sure. I'm Lynn. This is my husband, Brian. We're at 311 Stage Road. We recently moved here and purchased the property from the Caperons, land that's recently been conserved by SELT. We own and operate Dandelion Forest Farm for the past 2 years. We really focus on local food for local people, growing what grows best. It's really well suited to the soil and the environment. We do a lot of regenerative growing practices, including a lot of perennial crops like chestnuts and elderberries, but we also grow a lot of diversified annual vegetables and herbs. We sell a lot of these at our on-site farm stand. We're also trying out a small 10-member CSA vegetable share this season. And we also do educational farm events like gardening workshops and the farm dinners. Last season, we did 4 farm dinners on site. Charlene suggested that we filled out the special event permit. We thought they all went really well. Prior to that, in 2021, while we were on leased land in Kensington, we also did 10 farm dinners that also went well. So for our 3rd growing season, we're expecting 8 to 12 events for this season and moving forward. I think there's a lot of big farms in the area like Emery Farm and Appleton Orchard, which are all really great operations, but their scale is quite large. It's just us farming, mostly me. I am a trained chef. I worked as executive chef of a 78-unit restaurant chain in the Northeast. Before that, I spent 2 years as a pastry chef in Boston. Our chef partner, who's worked with us in the last 2 years and will continue working with us for the farm dinners, has owned her own restaurant in Brooklyn for 5 years. She's worked at restaurants in Portsmouth and Maine. And, really, we're just proud of the fact that not only are we supporting our local food and produce that's highly seasonal, we're also supporting other local farms in the area. We buy from Whippoorwill and Brazen Hill. Lauren Joyce Farms for their milk. Really we're just looking for approval for these events moving forward. We really hope that it's adding to the agricultural history of Nottingham, and we're really trying to plug in and be part of this local food system.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Haney, you've had a chance to review the application and provide some comments. Did you want to touch on any of that or the application completeness at all?
Yeah, so
And then we can.
the use falls under an agritourism, which is part of like the overarching definition of agriculture. So it is an allowed use, but there isn't really much in the way of regulatory for the town beyond that. So with that in mind, I listed out some, I call them issues and questions. I don't want to say it's an issue. It's something that the board should consider. To that end, it was hard to comment on completeness. The application is a bit unique. It's not so much physically how they're using the land, it's just a use of it. They're not proposing to build anything at this time. So what would be the expectation is hard to say. I mean, we're not asking them, and they didn't submit, you know, a traditional site plan. So I didn't want to really just say the obvious, which is that it doesn't have the things that we need to call it complete. But given its unique application, because it's an events-based thing, I kind of wanted to leave it open for you all to make that decision, make that call. So, with regards to the specific question of completeness, I'm kind of deferring. I don't really want to put my foot down on this one way or the other. But there are some questions. I'm happy to go through them now if you'd like. If you want to wait, that's fine as well. I do think some of these can be addressed. I did get an email back that, you know, the content, which I haven't shared with you all, but, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know how much more you want to hear.
Sure, yeah, no, we can go towards acceptance first, so, I'm sure there's probably a question. I was looking through our zoning, so obviously agriculture is, you know, is in our master plan, it's in our zoning, we have districts for it. And then we don't define differently in any of our documents, agritourism, so we define agriculture, but it's limited from there, so I usually then defer to like the state RSA. If there's a definition, which there is, you could still go to the dictionary and get a different definition, but I would reference the state RSA, so I don't wanna get too much into it, but reading through some different documents, and this is for the board level, there was some question as to how do we handle something like this? You know, do we have authority to hear it? Does the applicant have to come before us for something like this? And if we do have authority, you know, is our scope limited at all? I don't know if you know, that's something, I don't know if SRPC has seen, or we can always go to council just to make sure that we're not overreaching, making an applicant jump through more than they need to, where it's a use that is, the primary use of the land is something is intended by all our guiding documents. So that said, I think we should, since we do have an application before us, you know, I think we should act on completeness, and if there's some items in there that, if we want more information, we can always get that, I feel.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve application for case number 23-001 SIT
Accept as complete or approve?
as complete.
I'll second the completeness.
Okay, so there's a motion by Mr. Anderson, a second by Mr. McKinnon to accept as complete the application. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries 7-0. All right, so that just lets us now have more, you know, more discussion, basically, because before that, we accept it as complete, we're limited as to what we can talk about, so. Is there anything additional that you wanted to add beyond what you've already kind of given us? No?
That covered it.
Okay. So I know Mr. Haney's report, it indicated some things, you know, there's no setback shown. It's not clear from the drawing. So how much, where on the drawing that you provide for us, or the kind of overview, is the, like, where's the conservation easement on the property? Is it the majority of the property and just not the farmhouse, or?
So the conservation easement is a 2-acre exclusion. It covers all but 2 acres, which is an exclusion zone, which is the house. I have printed out a different map that we emailed out earlier that has it shown. I can pass it around if that's helpful.
I'd love to see it, yeah. Just a reference for scale.
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
But essentially the easement or the exclusion zone runs into essentially our first seat of the table. And then the rest of it is covered on the conserved land.
Okay.
So about, I would say 90% of the tables are on the conserved land. The welcome tent is on the exclusion zone.
Okay, and when you mentioned possibly in the future adding, you know, a permanent structure, is that, can, I know that the easements are all different, is, you know, if it's a agricultural easement, you might be able to put a structure that's supportive of that, you just can't do a habitational structure, so is that gonna be in that easement area, or?
It would be on the conserved portion of the land, so with the SELT agreement, we're allowed to develop in the land that, as long as it maintains agriculture, agritourism, or agroforestry. The agritourism definition that SELT provides includes meals, as part of their definition as well as workshops. The one stipulation is that we could not cover more or create more than 2% of the land being non-permeable. So the pavilion that we were talking about would be significantly less than 2% of 29 acres.
Yep. And is that kind of proposed to be in the area of the, where the dinner tents are shown?
Right, it would be to replace the tents
Yeah.
with permanent structure.
So up near the tree line in that area, okay.
You're saying 2% of the 29 acres, correct?
28.
29 minus 7, so 27, yes.
20, yeah. Right, I'm going off your tax card, so I'm just, it says 29.
That's it.
Do
Okay.
you have the silt paperwork?
This is a copy of the easement that was recorded, with Rockingham.
No, that's good, I saw, I was more curious. Send me to it, during the park, and I was looking.
Yep.
I already got one in here.
Is that the, so that's the only difference, do you have, no, there's a difference here, that white line is to approximate 2 acre unreserved.
And then this is I have the surveyed map that SELT has, if that's helpful.
I want to know what it says when it says the SELT gives you granting to have, where it reads, how it states, you have permission from SELT to host dinners and
It's
stuff like that.
agritourism, and within the RSA of agriculture,
I want to see it.
agritourism is in there, and SELT has the most friendliest agricultural conservation
I'm not against what they're
easements.
doing, but I just
Yeah, I
want to see
know,
it.
but I'm just, it's there,
I think it's
I
page,
guarantee
It's
you.
in section 1.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, and that's,
Oh, thank you.
so that part, obviously, even that, and then if you do go to add a structure at some point, both those things would, you'd have to get SELT approval, and then the code enforcer, the building inspector would be the one issuing the building permit. So in my reading of the RSAs and some of the handbooks that are out there for, interpreting agriculture and agritourism, is that we do have some purview over these in that, you know, we can discuss like parking and access, and then, you know, and if like structures are being added, we can look at those or try to provide some, you know, some boundaries with it. At this scope, do I think we need like variances for, like, is this a commercial use? It doesn't seem like it at this scale. It seems like it's still in line with the agricultural side of things, because again, an accessory use.
I'd argue it's part of that exception part, it's agriculture, yes, it might operate as a commercial business, but it falls under the agricultural definition. Right.
Yep. Especially at this scale, so I think, while maybe a site plan application maybe wasn't necessary, that, you know, the applicant was kind of guided towards us, through the town, because, you know, they've had an event permit for this, when they had fewer events, but now where they wanna increase them, I think that's where the town was like, oh, you know, this may trigger site plan review, so go talk to the planning board. So I think it's a good time to potentially set some parameters that, so that if it is approved, the applicant can, you know, has guide as to like what they wanna do, the number of events, all that kind of stuff, and then it creates like a threshold that, you know, if it gets to a certain scale, scope, whatever, then it comes back for an amended site plan. Was the way I would, way I was thinking of proceeding with it.
Yeah, my take on it was, we've seen, not many, but we've seen some other, what I would deem agricultural businesses, some, like say for example, I think the last one was a horse-related one, over there near Poor Farm or Berry.
Yep.
And it's more of a guidance tool, and again, similar size application. And the goal there is to kind of benefit, I think, the applicant too, and not, just go willy-nilly on the site. And I think this is, for the purpose of the business, I think this is adequate. I know, Blair, I know you had some comments relating to, one of them was actually something that I had thought of, and it was more so, we don't care about, but it's more from a state level, was this, like the bathrooms and this, you know, obviously this house has a septic system, so, it's nothing we can regulate, but it's just something to consider, obviously, the loading on that septic system. And then, I think the one thing I wanna focus on that you highlighted was, where we would wanna provide guidance and just have some surety is the parking. And I think, I've driven by here and it's kind of that parking, it's within the trees, right? It's kinda like covered onto the side, or I know it's kinda cleared, but, I think this all looks great, and especially with the level of, events you guys are gonna be holding. The only thing I would note, and it's more so for you guys to potentially get ahead, is that I would double check with DOT, New Hampshire DOT. They might view this, obviously, they're gonna see it the same way, it's an agritourism business, but you wanna at least reach out to them, because if they get reports of, 20 vehicles leaving, something like that, we don't have any control over the driveways here. I would just reach out to them. It's good being a homeowner, because they'll work with you. You can call the local district. I think we're under District 6 out of Durham. That was the only thing I noted. There's a little rise there, as you go west, so it'd be nice for you guys to get ahead of that, because DOT will get calls and they'll just show up. But other than this, I think it's a great use, for the property. And the fact that you guys are gonna have people there helping with, it's a limited event, and you're gonna have people there helping with parking. That was kind of my biggest issue here, just fitting it on the residential site, but I think it'll work.
The other thing to add to that is, most the 4 events we did last year, people arrive over the course of about an hour, and then they leave after dessert, so they trickle out over about half an hour. So we don't generally get all 40 people arriving at once or leaving at once.
And that's good, yeah.
So that tends to help with the traffic on the road.
The time of the event is probably a 4-hour from start to finish. And, so, right now, no proposed additional exterior lighting, like for the parking area. For the bathrooms have been mentioned a couple times, I imagine you probably do porta potties? Or at this level, do you have them use,
So
whatever the bathroom is that's on site?
part of the issue we have is with the events being every other week,
Yeah.
the rental fees for the porta potties get fairly significant for that type, for 4 hours every other week. What we have been doing is the front room, we were able to section off and use that. There's a guest bathroom there that people have been using.
Yeah, so it's a dedicated bathroom, yeah. And some of that, the code enforcer would talk to you about, or potentially if there's a requirement for that, that's done through code. So I know we've had cases in the past where the question came up, and this was years ago, where the code enforcement talked about what's acceptable. And so that would be something that they would probably tell you about if there's a requirement there.
You just said you were having events every other week?
Correct.
During the growing season, so within the 8 to 12, we would schedule them out, so they're not all at once, they're just kind of June through September roughly.
So I think for things we would normally look for, if this was like a commercial endeavor, we would be looking at proximity to neighbors and what kind of buffers are there, hours, number, max number of people, the traffic flow, that kind of thing. And then lighting and, if there was a change to the septic system or anything like that, that could just get through for a state permit. So, from my standpoint, I would probably ask of you of setting a net max, so without creating something that's overly restrictive or too friendly, setting like a max number of guests kind of threshold that works, set some kind of hours, so we can just put it in, like, in if there is an approval, we could have those kind of just registered in that way. You grow beyond that and want to change the scope, or it's going so well that, you want to do it much more often, that we could just have another conversation.
Town special event application, is there a threshold there that kind of protects us?
That was 100.
It's just an attendance number? Okay.
I thought there was 2 thresholds.
I was curious if there was a number of event threshold.
Oh, number of events per year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be. So the town event permit, that's done through the select board, which is what you've already encountered. Is there any other comments
Yes, I'd like to spring on what Ian said about the bathroom. Did you accommodate 40 people last year at your events, or did you have fewer than 40?
I think at most we had 37.
Okay, and the bathroom facility was fine with that number of people?
Yeah,
Is-
it's, they kind of have to like walk back to the house, so it just generally over the course of the time, there's not like a rush for it all at once.
Is it ADU accessible for handicapped people?
It is not.
Okay.
Any other comment or question from anybody?
It's more just a plan, so, looking out, if a permanent structure is proposed, do we feel like that is something that they should expect to come back before this board that we should review, or is that something that would be outside the purview of like our site plan review scenario? I just ask because, you know, I think Dale would wanna know. I think now is a time to, you know, set some expectations, I think that's kind of what we're trying to do. Just to be mindful of public health and public safety. I think everybody here wants to be supportive and allow something like this to happen, but be mindful of those things and then procedurally next time.
What were you saying about the planning board being involved?
On this,
Selectmen.
the select board involved? So they had, so last year, because they had fewer events, they went through an event permit policy
Yeah.
instead. So now where the number of events was increasing,
Okay,
the
thank
town
you.
felt they probably should come see us for site plan review.
That would be the other question. Is this gonna be treated as now a continuation of a temporary thing where they should continue to do that? Or, you know, does this sort of like set it like, okay, this is what you can do
The
now?
event policy side, I would recommend that they confirm with the select board on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not our
No, that is a
purview.
good question, because I felt like it again, we had another case, application last year that was adding an event type place. And because that was what the site plan was, the town indicated to us that they wouldn't need that event permit because that's what it's being approved for, so. So I would just say if this gets approved, just double check with the select board, so. I think that brings us back to, if you were to set, criteria that we could, like, put on, you know, create like on file, so that if it becomes an expansion of that, that would trigger another site plan.
So they've been running under the event permit right now?
Yep.
For the last year?
Just the last season, yeah.
So what prompted coming here to the planning board?
I was speaking with Dale to just see if we wanted to do the coverage structure, what I
Oh, I
might need,
see.
and then he said we should probably check with you guys.
To me, this whole case goes down to, so they have the right to farm, they have the right to do agritourism. Dinners are considered agritourism under the definition of agriculture. So the RSA 674-32B that allows for expansion as long as it complies with state laws, regs, rules. The question is whether or not we think that what they're doing, going from how many dinners they had under the event permit through the town to what they want to do now, is that a significant enough expansion that they have to do the site plan? That's my question. We could view it as that, and then they have to go through the site plan, but then that begs the question about whether or not they have to continue then still getting the permits from the event permit from the town. It's, me, this is just go through the town to get the event permits and not necessarily a site plan, because it all fits within agriculture.
So I guess my take on that was that you could almost do it the other way and that there isn't the need. So I think some might argue that what we have here is not what you would take as your typical site plan, but again, that's up to the board to decide, and I think we've all kind of said, you know, with some of the agriculture, right, that this, it gets the point across, right, it's a unique business. I was more so leaning towards we have a site plan application, that we can take action on. As part of that, I think like the chair was getting at is, I know here in the description, you'd like to host annually, say, 8 to 12 events. So if the applicant was willing to, you know, we could, as part of the conditions, we could take this, and if we deem it enough to, you know, for us to take actions, we could vote and say, yeah, we think this works for, say, 12 events, and then that condition, is, say you wanna go to 14, just means you gotta come back and have a conversation, and to your point, I know the chair was getting at this, like, you know, if that permanent structure, like, I think it comes down to is how much permanent infrastructure you start building out, right? Because as it becomes more successful, you might say, well, this could be a nice improvement to make the parking easier or something. You're gonna, I mean, I imagine you guys are learning every time you do the events, so I think my take was, like I said, we've had some of these agricultural, they fall under that state RSA, it controls most of it, but it's kind of the two parties, us and the applicant, working together, saying, you know, maybe you don't need a site plan, but maybe we memorialize this as a site plan approval, so at the town level, you don't have to go, because I think if we do that, they do not need to go to the, for special event permit every single time. It's less paperwork, but it's like, this is now on file, because otherwise, if we don't take any action on it, or we just let the application go, the only oversight in terms of layout or how operations just falls on submitting the same thing to the town administrator, or the select board, and I think that's probably where Dale was kinda coming in, that it's in that gray area of operationally it acts as a commercial business, but, there's more so state governance over it, so I think I'm fine with what I see, and it might just, it helps the applicant, I think, in the long run, if we memorialize this as a site plan approval, if everybody else agrees, but,
So there is a document, it's the local agriculture, local regulation of agriculture toolkit.
That's an older one,
I read through that.
yeah.
You know, so this to me says that there are things that the town can regulate and perhaps should. It's just to what extent, and, I mean, this has been submitted without us really having too many regs in place, so, you know, what can we really do? But
You wanna go to the legal guide, that's outdated. There's a legal guide that, was put together,
The one I read through was New Hampshire Cooperative Extension.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
UNH Cooperative Extension, I think, was the one that created it. It was from 2020.
So right now, you're thinking of 8 to 12, is what you're thinking of. If the business were to grow and you were to, you know, produce more, maybe have employees and stuff, would you see doing more of these events? Or are you initially thinking you'd probably stay at 12 and expand the CSA side of the business, or do something else?
Yeah, I think our primary goal is farming, and doing the events is nice, and we love having people come and doing the education, but it certainly takes away from the farming. So I can't imagine doing it, like, we're not gonna be doing it every week during the season. Maybe if it goes really well, we might move it in the 15 to 20, but it's already a lot. So I can't imagine doing a ton.
So, you know, I guess this is the same thing, the same argument we're talking about is, you know, if you were just doing CSAs, you could still have the same number of people there for, or even more for pickup. And that wouldn't be regulated. So again, what I'm looking at is just trying to create like if we do it this way, is create some kind of baseline that if triggered after that, then it just causes you to come back. So it gives the town a little bit, makes something formal, gives the town a little bit of something that they can measure against, gives you some breathing room, because you have something that's approved, if it does get approved. So it kinda, I think, can be a win for all sides. So I would recommend, if we approve this, that we go to a higher threshold on the number of events, to like 20.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
And then the only other, sorry, one,
Sorry.
set the hours, so, you know, 8 to 10, 8 AM to 10 PM, something like that, so it's, and set potentially a max number of, attendees, like, you know, 100 before, you know, I don't know if you plan on having events 100 or more.
No, we can't, I don't think we can fit that many people.
And then, so I think if we get to those numbers, then we would have to look, because then you're talking about, you know, parking, the access to the road, which again, like Mr. McKinnon pointed out, we don't control the state routes or the access to, so that's where the DOT can come into and and they can have, a say or require additional, permits. And then, obviously, then you get state septic permits depending on, you do a certain scale, so that's my thoughts on it. And then, since we have a partial site plan, we can do these more informally. We've had some that were hand-drawn, you know, potentially adding to this, just, some setback lines, measurements, you know, so trying to keep things away from, say, 50 or 100 feet away from, abutting parcels. So if you do an event, just try to keep it away from the neighbors. Adds harmoniousness to everything.
I like your plan, but I'm gonna say this right up front. I think right now, I've been sitting on this board long enough that we are taking this application, or if you're ready to push it through, quite easy. For the fact that you're gonna have 20-something cars parked on this property every event, if they have close to 40 people. The in and out of traffic going into this property for 3 months of time for the year when they're doing it. You know, we've taken more deliberation on smaller projects than this. I like what you're doing, I really do. But I think that the due diligence of this board on somebody basically having almost a restaurant, seasonal, for what they're serving, parking,
That's
access to
ridiculous.
156, I mean,
That's
152.
ridiculous. Have you seen Stage Road? They're talking about a small little business.
I'm not against the business, but I'm just saying that,
That
you know,
you're
this
against the
board.
people who
I'm
wanna
not
do the
against anything.
business.
I'm just asking
You don't
for
need
the
a
due
cop to
diligence.
take out 20 different cars that
asking
come
for a
through on
cop.
their property. They could have a holiday party, and
not
it'd be
arguing
20
the facts.
cars.
I'm just stating what my opinion.
Well, it's against the people. Your opinion is against the people. I live on Stage Road, I know.
How are you thinking I'm against the people when I'm
Because
asking my opinion?
well, your opinion is not for the people.
So, Mr. Morton, so I
To
guess,
think that they need a DOT out front for 20 cars?
I'm not asking for a DOT. I'm just saying that we would ask anybody on any road like this, if they were gonna have this many cars access, that why wouldn't they?
Because they're
Have
doing, they're
something set
having
up.
what, 10 cars between
Hey, I'm
8
all about
hours?
that.
Between 8 hours? You don't like that? That's too much for you?
Listen.
Are you kidding me? Seriously?
no, so I just want to dial back. So, Mr. Morton, I guess, you know, I understand what you're saying. So, I guess, what are you, do you have anything that you're proposing that we do differently, or anything that
Do
you'd
you
like to
understand what
see?
he's saying?
Are you thinking of a sidewalk, or where are you or you want just more
I just think there should be more details involved.
plan-wise?
For what?
Yeah, absolutely.
For what? Everybody's agreed that it's okay.
The thing is, and it's like we did with the,
Listen, I'm allowed to voice my opinion when I wanna voice my opinion here, and that's fine. If you agree with it or don't agree with it, that's fine also,
Okay,
all right? But
sure,
that's all, I'm just voicing my opinion.
okay, you did.
Thank you.
so one of my questions on this, again, is, it's kind of like with forestry. Our hands get tied a little bit, because the state regulates it. So
You
with
were just-
agriculture and
You were
agriculture,
just all set to let it
agritourism,
go.
you
You
know,
were just all set to let it go and be okay.
I'm
He's just putting
I'm
it, he's just putting it on the
explaining
record
I'm
that we are
explaining-
hand-tied
I'm
by the state
explaining
regulations.
why, if it seems that we may be not holding this to as strict a standard as, say, a commercial application is, these are the reasons why. So with certain areas, the state sets the rules, we can make them more restrictive. We don't in our zoning, there's nothing in our zoning that specifically restricts agritourism or defines it differently than what the state does. So what I read up on it, through OSI and some of the other documents, was where does our purview come in? And that's the areas that I addressed where, you know, things that could be, come up as a concern. Why does, I don't know if the town did this, so I'm gonna take a step back. It could be before us because I'm sure in other communities, things have expanded to a point where towns are now looking at, how the lands are used. This does not seem of that scope or scale that it's triggering that threshold for me. And I don't wanna compare or name names of any places, cause it wouldn't be fair to them or to you. So for me, again, my opinion is, we've had site plans come in with less information. We have the authority to weigh every case by its own merits. So in my opinion, throwing on some additional measurements on here, 50-foot or 100-foot, just around a square around the property to kind of give an idea of where things are.
Approximate to the best of their ability.
Approximate, yeah. It doesn't have to be surveyed.
But they've only got 2 acres to work with.
No, they've got 28, they've got 30
Right, but they've only
acres.
got 2 acres that they can work with.
No,
Yeah,
they can work with,
28.
they can work with the whole 20, they can work with the whole 30. So they're
Under the
limited,
Conservation
they're
Act?
limited on the additional 28 as to what they can
Under
do.
the Conservation Act, what was the 2 acres that we talked about?
That's just the building envelope, so that just means that 2 acres is carved out of the easement, meaning that land, that 2 acres is not under an easement conservation. It's not under conservation.
Right, so wouldn't that
So,
be the only 2 acres?
so the remaining land is all under the easement, and it's all, and their business is an agricultural business defined by the state. So depending upon, if they wanted to build a structure on it, as long as it's within the allowance of the easement, they can build a structure. They can do pretty much almost anything on that land, agriculture related. And,
But the building is limited to that 2 acres, is what I'm
no,
saying.
not necessarily. If it's an agricultural purpose, they can build on that.
They could not build a new
Land
residential
under
home on
easement,
the
right.
land, and that's what the 2 acres is
Right.
reserved for.
They
They
is
sold their
normal
development
operation.
rights, is what the easement is just selling the rights to development, but. So they can do the dinner there, they can have tours there,
But as long as they're within the easement structure. they can-
within the
language,
easement
yeah.
language,
Correct.
under the definition of agriculture, which all of that falls under the definition of agriculture.
Yeah, and that's where coming up with a number to keep it, and again, the agritourism is, the definition of the agritourism side, or one of the pieces of it, is that it's accessory to the primary use of the land, so that's where I think if we're come up with a number of events, whatever,
But
that's
they
kind of
did.
that's kind of determining that's, it's accessory to or supplementary to, not the primary use of the land, that's where.
Farm
And I
is
find, that's where I find, like, if we get to a certain threshold, well, okay, then it's probably gonna, we have to look at that again and make it treated differently in the future, if and when it ever grows to that event and you decide to do something like that.
So that's where I kinda wanna start nailing down just some of these criteria that I think we would wanna kinda set that threshold. So there was thrown out there, you've had 12 events, so I mentioned maybe 15, I think the chair even suggested up to say 20. It's probably a lot of work for you guys to get to, and almost as many weeks as you have to do it. So I guess we'd recommend 15 or 20, and it's really up to the board to decide that, and obviously the applicant, we're proposing a number higher than what they're anticipating now, but I know you had mentioned 20. That essentially is the growing season, so it still is a seasonal.
Yeah, I think
Operation.
20 is reasonable, because then it gives them the opportunity that if they wanted to have a fall dinner, they could have a fall dinner. If they wanted to have a winter dinner, they could have a winter. It
yeah.
allows them kind of off-season to do something if they want to do something.
Okay, so, and then one is business hours, I think it was mentioned in here something about, you guys are kind of, people are fizzling out at the latest by 10. The town doesn't have a noise ordinance, everybody knows that. So I guess it's an 8 to 10 in case you do wanna do a breakfast business, so if 8 to 10 works, I think that was what I had in mind. if
Or
that-
just
if
put
that
a,
End date,
don't put a start date, put an end date, end time on it, and that's mainly because it is in a residential area, and just being sensitive to the residents, but, if it's 10, if it's 11.
yep,
This is not gonna be lit, correct?
very little.
Oh my gosh, they're in the middle of nowhere. What difference does it make?
We have, under the tents last year, we had, string globe lights, and then we have, small down lights to light the paths, from the main tent area back to the parking area.
So it would be possible to run this after dark.
It is, but usually when the days get shorter, it also gets colder, so that tends to limit the ambition of people to stay around. So generally speaking, with the shorter days and the colder temps, we tend not to have dinners.
And that kinda gets into my next point, Buzz, was gonna be, we throw this condition on there a lot, and it is a town ordinance, it's just, any new lighting, just refer to the town lighting ordinance, it's right in the town zoning ordinance. Essentially, no giant floodlights, I don't think you guys would want that either, but it's just downcast lighting, so it sounds like you guys are on there, but we like to always throw that on there, cause again, it's commercial per se. So those are kind of the three things I've come up with, that I think do some due diligence for the town, but still, again, it leaves a lot of this to the state RSAs and agritourism.
And Alana, if I may ask, so usually with our applications, they go out to all departments, or all departments have a chance to review them and provide comment. To your knowledge, was there any comment or feedback from fire, police, highway agent, or anything like that?
No. I don't think it got sent to them. They've already got an event permit, so they've already been through all that part. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, I think they get copies.
If it was an event permit, and then a special event, it would have gone to them, but I didn't know I was supposed to. No, I don't think you were.
They did review that for the special event last season.
Okay.
And again, you mentioned the DOT just notifying them of what them, but do you have any communication with them?
No, we haven't.
Yeah, so I'll just say, it's not really a condition on us, it's more of just contact and coordinate DOT. Again, we don't have any jurisdiction over it, it's more of a, I'd hate to see somebody show up at your doorstep, middle of the season with some questions.
Ian, would they contact the district or just call the state?
You're probably better off going right to district, which I believe,
6.
District 6, right, we're still right there on the edge, so call District 6, Roger Appleton runs the district. If you call them and explain what you guys are doing, they tend to work with you. They may ask you to do a driveway permit and just turn it around, so they, again, have something on file, so they're probably familiar with the agricultural side. They deal with all temporary permits that like loggers need, that kind of stuff, so they'll work with you, but, yeah, I'll just, that will cover that. Alright, so I kinda got those 4 things that we might just put in there just to note. And then obviously this stuff will all go on file for the town, and Dale will have something to look at.
Yeah, these don't get, do site plans get recorded at the registry?
Not unless they have boundary.
Yeah.
They won't,
I'm
they
trying to think
won't,
if
they
we
won't
have to
record
make
that.
it registry compliant.
Not unless what?
It has to have boundary information to be recorded. As, if you're considering it a site plan, it needs to be a boundary. I don't think I have anything else.
Do you want to make a motion?
The honors, or you want me?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You got it in your notes.
I'll make a motion that we approve case number 23-001 SIT Dandelion Forest Farm at 311 Stage Road, for the agritourism business as described in the application. With a couple conditions to note, on the file, maximum of 20 events per calendar year, before needing to come back to the board with a new application. Event hours, events ending by 10 p.m. And to note, any new lighting shall comply with the town's lighting ordinance. And then just as a note to the applicant, to contact and coordinate with NHDOT for their access onto, the state highway.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. McKinnon, and a second by Ms. Mooney.
Do we want to just make any reference to the RSA's for right to farm, and our definition of agriculture is the definition of this state?
I think we can do that under the,
In the notes or in the minutes or something?
in our,
Could you clarify the number of people too in the motion?
No, we didn't talk about a number of people, just the number of events.
findings of fact. That sounds good.
Finders of fact, yes, findings of fact.
So I guess conversation at the board level on the motion is, do we want to amend it to include, also include a max number of attendees?
It's been what,
I think it's-
advertised as about roughly 40 people right now, ticket-wise. fine with it, I'm fine with keeping it at 40, or if we need to provide a buffer up to say 45, if you have an extra person joining in the car. It sounds like what they're showing us here, though, is that's what this has been laid out to do. If there is a much larger structure that, I think we've gone into that, like, when Dale will look into a building permit for something like that, so.
I think don't put it as the number of people, just put it as the number of events.
But also if there's changes that they anticipate, they can come back to the board or to the building inspector and get, permission.
What did the event permit allow you to have for a number of people?
Up to 99.
There we go,
99.
there we go.
Yeah, that's where it kind of falls back on, is the town does have some sort of threshold there.
They've had a permit, that difficult.
No, that's why I said, I think I said 100 people, just see if they could get over that, and then it becomes a much different, everything, the scale just goes up, precipitously with parking, cars,
There wouldn't be.
everything.
There wouldn't be space.
At that point, if we would
But
wanna
she's a
have it.
one-person farmer, she doesn't have,
They wouldn't even have to come to us, but for the special permit that the town, special event permit that the town has.
So that sounds like no on that. Did you ask if we should include the RSA, or is that just gonna be in the
I
findings?
think we're gonna do fact of findings, or findings of fact, whatever it is that's called now, that we have to write up.
Okay.
Any further discussion on this? So we have, again, motion by Mr. McKinnon, second by Ms. Mooney, to approve with conditions being, that it would be required to come back for a site plan review with, if, so no more than 20 events, and events must end by 10 PM. Lighting should comply with it, with our ordinance, and to check in with NHDOT regarding the driveway access. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0-1.
Was this sent to you?
Yes.
We just wanna make sure this gets to Alana.
Yep.
I like that this one kinda has that extra
And it has
stuff
the
on there,
links,
so
yeah.
if we can just get that for the file, that'd be great.
Okay.
So one of the new requirements from the state legislature is that when a town approves or denies any applications, we should also be having a finding of fact recorded in the minutes. So the finding of fact on this, and we can amend this, but my understanding of what we're saying in finding of fact is that agriculture is generally expressly allowed within our master plan and our zoning, site plan and subdivision regulations. We all touch upon agricultural being a primary use. We do not have a definition for agritourism, so we're reliant on,
Agritourism is in the state definition of agriculture.
so we're relying upon the state definition. The board is relying upon the state's definition of agritourism within the agricultural definition in the RSA. And we're finding that at the current use proposed, that this meets that use. That sound, to have anybody want to either add to that or take away from?
Yeah, I would just also add RSA 432-32, New Hampshire right to farm.
Yeah, it's not actually titled that, but that's what it's technically called, right? You're all set. You're good. Yeah, thank you all for coming.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is case 23002-SUB, Concrete Products, 100 Smoke Street, application from Concrete Products of Londonderry, requesting a planning board approval of a 3-lot residential subdivision. Utilizing the existing frontage on Smoke Street, the property is located at 100 Smoke Street, Nottingham, and identified as tax map 11, lot number 3.
Good evening, board. For the record, I'm Henry Boyd with Millennium Engineering. I was in front of you guys probably 6 months ago or so. I really like this plan a lot better than the other plan that we had. I know I can go through the whole thing if you'd like, again, for the record, but the other plan that we had was 4 lots. And that required us having to have, if not a stream crossing, it was developing some of the property out in the back, which kind of broke my heart a little bit because it's such a nice piece of property to leave alone. So the applicant kind of relented and said, let's just do the 3 lots. And I think that that was the favor of the board to begin with when I was here and got all of the comments. I know that we had some real thoughtful comments from Mr. McKinnon, and he did a very good job looking through the requirements that you have. But just briefly, I will say, we're about 35.5 acres, an abundant amount of frontage. One of the concerns is that we're right on the little river, so we have a 75-foot offset from the flood zone. We have a zone A flood zone, and then the rest of the property is zone X out of the flood zone. There is a wetland that nearly bisects but doesn't connect in the back. But one of the other things that we had talked about was the 30,000 square foot building area. And because this site had been disturbed by some gravel moving operations in the past and those things, I do believe that there's a hydrological report that was sent to you guys. You have that. I brought one for the record if you don't, but I think it was already submitted. So the first sheet is going to be recorded at the registry. And the second sheet is simply an existing conditions and perimeter survey of the entire parcel before showing any proposed division lines. And the third one is the existing conditions, which shows this crazy moonscape of topography out here. All of the lot development, as you can see on the fourth sheet, which is actually shows the test pit areas, the state 4K septic areas. It shows the 30,000 square foot building envelopes for each of them. It shows the wellhead areas. It also shows some suggested driveways and then the proposed grading. This is an 80 scale, so everything looks smaller, but there's actually substantial division between the 2-foot contours here. There's almost 20 feet of change, so 1 to 10 slope. So it's going to be very gradual once built out. So basically what the grading will do is correct that crazy mounds that were left out there by the gravel operation. But like I said, I'm very happy that we're at 3 lots. I think it does this property much more justice than the 4-lot subdivision application that we've had before. So I'm hoping that you can get an approval on this.
Thank you. Mr. Haney, you had a chance to review the application, and so first we're going to be talking about completeness. And did you have any comments you wanted to add at this level?
They didn't request any waivers, so, you know, for completeness, that does help out. They mentioned a hydrologic study just now, but I hadn't seen one, so I did point that out in my notes because it's in the Aquifer Protection District. And then just the notifications that are necessary as part of the stream overlay district, stream protection district. And then there's a couple comments about the site layout, but as far as completeness, I've got a geologic study in my hand here, so it does appear that we can vote on it with regards to completeness,
Thank
as
you.
well as a DSI or DRI.
I'll make a motion that we, accept case number 23-002- or SUB, as complete.
Second.
So it's a motion by Mr. McKinnon, second by Mr. Anderson. One other question I should have asked, since we did have a similar application before us that we technically denied, but I believe we denied it without prejudice, meaning it could come back before us. So procedurally, we are okay to see, it's ideally the same, not ideally, but theoretically the same, essentially, same plan. All right, is there any further discussion on the motion to accept as complete? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries 7-0. All right, now we can get into the more, oh, sure, yep.
I'll make a motion that, case number 23-002 SUB is not a development of regional impact.
I'll second.
So that's a motion by Mr. McKinnon, and a second by Ms. Anderson. Any further discussion on, that this is not, does not have, it's not a development of regional impact? Any further discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion carries 7-0 as well. Okay. So was there anything you wanted to add to your presentation before we kind of go into
I
the?
don't think so. The only other thing is that, I know that there were a lot of questions, involving the proximity of the river and those things, and we had Mark West, ferret out a lot of that information and make sure that we contacted the local river advisory commission if there was any concerns that they had, so you know Mark, he's a wonderful resource to us and a good friend of mine, so he's a great person to have on the team. But beyond that, I think, everything else is pretty straightforward.
Yep, and it looks like, and so, I don't wanna mix too much, but when this was before us last year, I know a site walk had occurred, correct me if I'm wrong on that. There was a lot of concern about where the lot envelope was, and it being the flood zone, the flood zone A. So we recommended pulling out of the building envelope away from that area. The areas in the front that had steep slopes, you touched upon this a moment ago, any of those steep slopes were human-made during the gravel pit operations, are not naturally occurring. And again, where there are those very poorly drained soils that pretty much bisect the lots, then you get into topography. It was pretty strongly recommended to try to keep the lots towards the front portion of the building, of the lot envelopes. So it looks like this accomplished a lot of what we had requested. Then, the only thing I see, proposed lot 3, the well radius just needs to be shifted a little bit. We have a regulation that the well radius has to be within the lot envelope, so that just needs to be shifted over
Yeah, I see that.
slightly. The only other thing I would propose to you to consider is right now you have 3 10 to 14 acre lots. I know sometimes people will look to create a slightly larger lot so that they can have, put the acreage in current use. So I don't know if it was thought of to potentially make 1 large lot and then 2 slightly smaller lots, maybe ending at where the wetlands are. So maybe make lot, say 1 large and go over behind, and they would be behind lots 2 and 3. That would also probably allow that potential landowner to, if they were so inclined, to either keep it in current use or look at like a conservation type easement.
Yeah, this is what the final, the die is cast as far as the client's concerned on that, but I do appreciate the comment. They could do that, I suppose, with lot 3 if they wanted to put this in current use, but you're right, it would have to be above 10 acres, and by the time you remove that out, you wouldn't have that as an option, but.
Yeah, I was looking at, like, you know, if you
Yeah.
drew the line over and made that, you know.
I did catch one other boo-boo on here, and I'm surprised that Ian didn't catch it, as I'm sitting here, I'm looking at this, that this contiguous upland area is not correct, so I'm gonna be revising this. You know how the ladies at the registry are anyway, so I gotta go through a fine tooth comb with this thing, but that needs to be revised, the contiguous upland area actually is not that. I think what my guys did, and I should have caught this, but this should have been removed out of there anyway. This is actually contiguous to this, but even if it were not, there's a minimum of at least 3 acres in the front of here.
Right.
To the south of that's contiguous anyway, but I'm just full super disclosure here that I need to fix that, because
Yeah.
that's incorrect.
The contiguity is bisected
Yep,
by the
yeah.
very poorly drained.
Yeah.
And then, since this came through too, we have a proposed zoning amendment to add a
I suppose.
25-foot no disturb vegetative buffer around wetlands.
Yep.
So I know you're showing the setbacks. I think where that's already been
Yeah.
through the public hearings and it's on the warrant article for approval, and this came in, to my knowledge, after that, you know, it might just make sense to, on any final plan to include that showing that should be a no disturb
Sure.
or along those wetlands.
So that, just to get this straight, Mr. Chairman, so, I actually am gonna add those to the recordable sheet as well, they're not on here, but I want those shown, the 75-foot buffer, but we'll show the 25, it's a 25-foot no disturb, is that what you said?
Yep, that's what's proposed
So I
on
will,
ballot
yeah,
next week.
so I guess we should wait to see what happens next week.
You'll know by the end of next week.
Yeah.
Technically, right now, they're in force, but they could be flooded.
We're in that limbo period.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I think is unconstitutional, that's.
It's like 120 days or something like that, that the building inspector has to hold it, so.
Yeah, so I guess we'll, before we make those final revisions and print a Mylar, we'll wait and see what happens next week and change
Yep.
that. But thank you for letting me know.
Yep, and then, I think technically this falls into the, blanking on the terminology for it, but I think, this has to go to, we have to get the local river advisory committee, review or input, or give them a chance to provide input.
They haven't done that yet with the last one?
It's a new application,
Oh, a
so.
new application.
Yeah.
So that was where I was gonna go, because this whole lot is in the shoreland,
Yep,
since Little River is designated,
yep,
and that kinda goes to tee off of yours, and I'm sure, the local river advisory committee would wanna comment on it, is, I was in reference to the soils plan, your fourth sheet.
yep,
I know there was some discussion last time, I know it's kind of a moonscape out there in terms of, there's a lot of growth, but it's the topography's all over the place.
right,
Is that technically what you're showing would trigger an AOT permit, because that is disturbance of land, you're within the shoreland, which has a 50,000 square foot threshold. And even then, I think it would trigger a 100,000 square foot threshold, just because AOT defines disturbance as altering topography.
that,
The way around AOT in many cases is, if you maintain natural trees and terrain along those shared lot lines,
Right.
it's not considered, it's different areas of disturbance.
yeah,
I guess I'd ask you to look at, just because what you're showing there would require an AOT, because it's shown across the lot lines, and if you just calculate rough area, it triggers, alteration of terrain based on the shoreland 50,000 square foot threshold.
yeah. so
We
that-
have a 30,000 square foot threshold, which would just mean you have to do a stormwater report. Granted, AOT would be more of the animal to deal with. So I guess with that, I would just say, consider what you're showing for development of the grading on these
Yes,
lots.
so that should have, in the shoreline, should have a 250-foot setback from
Right.
that river, so a lot of that grading is gonna be beyond that 250. Because if you look at the frontage on lot 3, it's actually almost 500 feet, it's 483 feet. So all of that grading is gonna occur outside of the 250.
Right.
But I agree with you, if there's 50,000 square foot of disturbance within the 250, you'd have to get an AOT, but I think
Yeah.
the disturbance is beyond the 250, so I'm not sure that we have.
You'll still, I mean, I did a rough calculation, if, based off of what you had, even if you took those two lots at 400 feet of frontage.
Yeah.
And you went I think that first bound on the left side of the plan there is about, what, 583 feet?
This one,
To the left with the abutting shared lot line to the left.
let's go to this one, so here's the shared lot line here between 2 and 3.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking, so even if you say, okay, we're outside of the 250, so we're not at the 50,000 square foot threshold, you go back to 100,000 square foot threshold.
Right,
Those two, I guess it'd be lot 1 and 2, each have about 200 feet of frontage.
correct,
You're showing grading as far back as 500 feet. That's greater than 100,000 square feet
Yeah.
of disturbance. So that's where it would trigger a state permit above and beyond our purview. And obviously above the 30,000 square foot threshold that we impose on each lot, which is kind of the envelope there too, it kind of correlates, but.
I agree.
So I think it's still it's just you're showing all the contours running across the lot, and if a contractor were to do that, I mean, from our perspective, my perspective too, I know it's a mix of vegetation, but I'd hate to see almost a cleared site there in the front with the homes. I mean, I'm always in favor of maintaining vegetation on the lot lines. I'll give you the feedback, I'm definitely in favor of this application versus the previous four. So that was the only thing I noticed, just because, again, it's,
Isn't most
That's
of
a
it
state-
gravel anyway?
it is, but,
The moonscape is gravel.
yeah, well, it's kind of, there's probably some.
There isn't a lot of
there's-
frontage
There's
there that
waste
has-
piles.
There's not a lot of frontage, greenery and frontage in there.
Oh, I agree, I'm just saying, it is beyond our purview, but if I see a plan that disturbs more than 100,000 square feet of
So we can,
area, that's a state permit, that's not a town permit.
so we would make that a condition where, because normally we condition state approvals and everything else, state
Well, how
permits.
about if we
Yeah.
did this, because I agree, and I didn't do the grading on these, but
Yep.
I hear what Ian is saying. Could it be a condition that if the contours remain as proposed, then both local and AOT permit should be required?
The problem is we can't approve a project like this that requires an alteration of terrain permit as a condition without seeing, that requires stormwater, unless you're gonna go for a complete waiver on stormwater.
Well, no, we wouldn't, but the subdivision of the lot doesn't trigger an AOT. The construction of the.
It's the proposed conditions you're showing,
That's
yeah.
correct, so
Yeah.
until they pull a building driveway permit, nothing actually is gonna happen. So I mean, that could be triggered at the time that the building permit is issued and not here, is what I'm saying.
But I'm also saying that what you're showing there is 100,000 plus square feet of contiguous disturbance across multiple lots.
So what I would.
We have a 30,000 square foot threshold, so
I don't
we'd
disagree.
be, in theory, in that sense, you'd either have to ask for a waiver from the 30,000 square foot requirement here, because what's presented to us requires a stormwater analysis, because it's over the 30,000 square feet of disturbance, just because it's proposed contours, so what the plan's telling me is it's going to be disturbed.
Yeah, so you're.
But I hear you, like it's an individual lot, they
Right.
don't have to, unless the the applicant's gonna do this prior to selling the lots, then it certainly requires permitting.
Right,
But my concern then is, if you say that, is somebody would have to go digging in they're gonna see this plan. Yes, it's not recorded, but they're gonna have access to it, it's gonna be on file here in the town. They're gonna be like, oh, we can just grade all of this, and then, of course, now you're relying on two potentially different landowners to mesh in. I'm just saying, when I look at this, it was submitted to us, it's a proposed plan, and it would require both local and state approvals based on the amount of disturbance, so unless waivers are pursued.
yeah, so why I think, my guys did this, and I didn't even think about this until right now, to be perfectly honest, is I think what they were trying to do, because you have a regulation that talks about the slopes within the 30,000 square foot area can't exceed a certain slope.
Correct.
I think that the thought was to get it back to more of what the natural condition may have been before this is crazy out there, you've seen it. So I don't think that they were even thinking about site-specific
And I think we
permitting.
talked about that last
Yeah.
time, and I think kind
We
of
did talk
the
about
board consensus though was that the steep slope provisions wouldn't apply because they're not natural steep slopes, so
That's exactly right.
that's where
Yeah.
you can show that within the 30,000 in this case, because it's been proven, everything in front of the wetland was a pit.
Yeah. So how's this? Because I agree with you. I don't think that they really have any need to be grading way up here. So and the other part of that conversation back when I was here before, and I'm getting old, so I forget a lot of stuff now, but I do remember that because it had been that gravel operation, it didn't quite fit that definition, so that as
Correct.
long as we could prove that it was, which we have, so if we're okay with this, what I would propose, because I'm all about protecting the environment and also staying away from AOT, but there really is no need to do all of this grading out here to begin with, if we're not going to have that as usable area. So if we don't have to create an artificial condition within that 30,000 square feet, and we can keep the grading to where the house is going and the septic system, I would like that. Because that's gonna be less disturbance. And as you said, even though there's a moonscape there, there is vegetation that's grown in and everything else. I'd prefer to leave it that way. So if this board is okay with us showing the grading only to a certain extent, and thereby limiting what we have to disturb, that's the way I would prefer to go.
Yeah, I mean, my take, to be honest, is for the purpose of the board, I think it's, you know, in cases like this, you might get a builder who buys all 3 lots and builds the houses. He sets one, or sets them back from the lot. Depending on the house design, the driveway comes in on one side or the front of the house.
Right.
Who knows what we're gonna get? That any proposed grading on the plan, who knows if the contractor's actually gonna build it or the builder's gonna build it.
right.
That, you know, for our purposes, we don't require you to show those proposed contours. I mean, I think if the lot was steeper, we'd wanna look at the driveways, but I think we've already established it's overall, it's a fairly level, or slightly, gently sloping site. You might just have some
Right.
alterations, but again, that's man-made. I mean, honestly, I'd be in favor, just pull those proposed contours off. We like to see these plans, because we like to see some of the contours, but, you know, when we get to the point of figuring out potential conditions of approval, we can put in the findings of fact, or we don't need to put in the conditions, but the findings of fact can say that the boards can, you know, we'll discuss it again if we need to. There's a consensus that you're not, the steep slopes per se are man-made and do not meet the definition of what the ordinance is trying to restrict against.
Yeah.
And I think that's intent behind the proposed grading, right, is to show that, is that it would save everybody a lot of headaches, because as long as there's proposed grading on the plans, or even individual lots, we need to make sure it complies with the 30K or the state regulations, so,
Right.
I mean, if you were to just pull off the proposed contours, that plan would be, you know, then we're not worrying about it, right? It goes under the individual lots, and like you said, when they pull a building permit, they deal with, you know, they have their own compliance to deal with at that point with the building
I'm
permits.
totally in favor of it, and that usually is my stance anyway, because
Yep.
a lot of towns will require that we show proposed grading, and even a house box of a house and with it, and that's, you know,
It's approximate
99
anyway,
times
so.
it doesn't happen that way, because of the style of the house, if they have a drive under, if they do this or a walkout, and the grading is ridiculous anyway, so.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to pull those proposed contours off. I think that why we did it is because of the conversation that we had before, but if we don't need to show it, then I would ask that we can remove them.
Yeah, until those are removed, or if it's not like discussed here, that the final plan will have them removed.
Yep.
It's showing proposed conditions that trigger the need for other, either additional materials or waivers, so if you pull them off,
We will.
you're designing 10-acre lots, and that's what it happens.
I'm fine with that.
I guess the other side of that is going back to days where it was a gravel pit operation, and gravel operations are regulated by the state, with limited purview by towns, but generally, there's like a restoration plan, but I don't know how old, if that predated this, or if that gets amended based on, not quite completely understanding like how gravel operations and restoration plans also may fit into an AOT discussion. But if there was a restoration plan and it gets amended with the state at all, you know, I guess that, I don't know if does that preempt an AOT or that? Are you aware, or was there a restoration plan? And
Even if there was a restoration plan, Mr. Chairman, if they did the grading, I think to Ian's point, if they did do this that's shown here, not only do we have a local town permit because it exceeds 30,000, but you'd also, regardless of a restoration plan in place, once you disturb more than 100,000 square feet, or if they were, to his point, if we were within 250, you're only allowed to disturb 50,000. Regardless of what was there or not, you'd still have to have a permit. So I like the idea of being able to remove those contours, because I don't know that that's what they're going to do anyway. And it's just kind of fantasy to show it, and I would hate to think that somebody felt that they would have to do that if they didn't.
yeah, so going back to all those pieces, obviously we have control of the local part of it. You know, if we discuss it, or if we made it a condition, if there were a condition that said, well, if total disturbance exceeds 30,000 square feet, applicant will present the stormwater plan to the town.
Correct.
You know, would that come back to the planning board, or would it just go to the building inspector to look at and review and potentially require additional things? So basically, would it become, ever potentially become a substantive change to a plan that then requires re-notification and?
Yeah, I guess,
all
That would fall on the individual lot owner at that point, yeah.
right, and if it would be, that has to be in your zoning ordinance, and if it would, I would think that would be a building permit jurisdictional issue. But, in other words, when they go to, they're gonna need a septic design from DES. And that septic design necessarily has to show the driveway, the house location, the well, and any grading associated with all of those things. And if that, at that point, that's more than 30,000 square feet, we'll have to satisfy the town. So I think it's a building permit trigger.
Yes, I would agree.
Is there any further discussion by the board?
Well, I have a question. I'm just looking at the survey map, the sheet A or whatever it's called.
The first one, ma'am?
Yes. And I'm looking at the frontage measurements. Lot 1 has a total of 200 feet. Lot 2 has a total of 211 feet. Together, that's 411. And together, that's larger than the frontage shown for Lot 3, Zone X. Visually.
I'm not sure what
So
you're
I'll do it again.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Do you, well,
200
correct,
plus 211
correct,
is 411.
yep,
That total length
right.
is larger than Lot 3, Zone X, which is measured at 465. That should be bigger.
No, it goes from here to here. The zone X is simply the flood zone, flood hazard zone line. So the frontage actually runs all the way to the Little River.
So that's 465.
It's 465 to a survey timeline, which is on there for mathematical closure, but the actual distance from the division of lot 2 to lot 2 and 3 to the river is actually 483 feet.
Okay, I didn't
frontage-
understand what those measurements.
Yeah, that's fine, and just, the reason that we put these and break these out is because they're made up of a deflection in the line. So you'll notice that the frontage for lot 1 and lot 2 is two different segments.
Oh, right.
Because the direction change.
Oh, yeah, I understand that, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think just to that point, just labeling it consistently would be an item just to add on to there, so.
Yeah.
Right, total frontage equals that
Yeah,
483
and I could just add that label over top of the
Yeah.
483.
I think that would,
It doesn't have it because it's one course, but if it helps to make the understanding, then I'll put it in there.
And my other suggestion is that the Conservation Commission would welcome the opportunity to look at these new plans. And our next meeting is next Monday on the 13th.
Okay, I can't be there, but, do they need a representative here from our company?
Ask Mr. Demerit, he's our chair, he's sitting there.
and I believe that's required in our, for Aquifer district.
Would we need someone to represent them, or do we just need to look at the paperwork?
Yeah, I mean, he's going down from
Doesn't say that.
4 lots to
Yeah,
3.
I would think they'd
On
be
the
thrilled
same
with this one,
proposal.
to be honest.
Should be better, not worse.
Yeah.
The commission can provide written comments to both parties, both the board and the applicant, and
Yeah, I think the way it reads, and I could be getting
it's guidance, right?
the guidance wrong, in the Aquifer district, I think it says, something about the Conservation Commission shall provide comment.
So that should be fine if you could provide documents
Oh, you're looking
for the
for the
commission to
aquifer.
review at their next meeting.
Yeah.
And we can provide comments back to you and to the planning board.
Sure, sure.
And also the,
And then LRAC would be, so we
Yeah.
would have to send it to Library River Advisory Committee and ask them to provide comment back,
and the revised
You know.
plans, yeah.
on the revised plans, which,
Again,
again,
it's better than
procedure,
it
but,
was.
but, you know, since it is technically a new application, I think statutory we're required to do so.
Thank you.
Welcome.
said it before. I think potentially for the seller of this or potential buyers, if lot 3 was put along like that and lot 1 and 2 were made smaller and at the wetlands, you wouldn't, the value of 1 and 2 probably wouldn't decrease, and lot 3 would probably go up quite a bit, because they would be able to have an opportunity to do, seek either conditional current use or, potential conservation easements on that, since it is along a protected river. So just put that out there one more time to, potentially mention it, and, 'cause I think you would still have you're not gonna change your lot envelopes up front.
I actually think with that thought in mind, it may be better if one property owner has all of the frontage along the river. Because it's much easier controlled, especially if it's in current use.
Yeah, so what I was showing was, so say you took
Can I
lot,
approach?
yeah, please, so what I was indicating was like potentially make this all lot 3.
Oh, yeah, I see.
So you keep lot 1 and 2, as long as your acreage is fine, which I think you said this is over 3 acres, and this would be over 3 acres. This would be a much larger lot. It would give a lot of value to this lot, again, because it's bisected by very poorly drained soils. It's gonna limit what could be done back there anyway, but it would give that potential landowner an option to seek, say, a conservation easement. And it'd probably be a high value area because it is a little river that's protected. And I don't think it's gonna necessarily change much for lot 1 and 2. If not anything, it might even potentially increase their value if someone did go with conservation, because then they would abut conservation land.
I
Just
have,
something to consider.
I agree with that. You know, you make lot 3 much more desirable to a purchaser.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's already 14.5 acres.
He went down from 4 lots to
Yeah,
3.
I understand, and nothing I'm saying is, nothing I'm proposing is even taking away anything from the applicant. It's potentially adding
Value to
value to
Value,
a
yeah.
potential
the
buyer.
lots and the potential buyer,
Yeah.
seller and buyer, so. While also trying to meet a goal of the town to, protect those environmentally sensitive
But
areas.
wouldn't we have suggested that with his last plan?
We did,
Different application.
And instead he went down from 4 lots to 3.
But again, new
Which is
application.
great.
Are we, I guess we're not looking at a conditional approval tonight?
Just because we have to get I would say, because we have to get Concom input, we have to allow for that, and then the Lamprey River Advisory Committee, I would see this as a condition, as a continuance and so this is our only meeting for this month because of the election next week,
Yeah.
and then the next meeting is our, no business
Election.
officers.
Yeah, and I'm not looking
So
to
it'd
be
be-
pushy or
it'd
rude,
be
I
the
just want
April.
some clarification
Yep.
here. So, if you look at, we have 75-foot wetland buffers.
Yep.
And we are over 200 feet away from any wetlands, so I'm not sure what.
Are we
conservation-
suggesting that they should go to the conservation, or are we telling them they have to go to conservation?
It's in the regs.
I believe it's
Just asking.
In the
Just be clear
regulation.
for people listening.
It doesn't say they have to go, I think it says the Conservation Commission must
Has
be
to
allowed to
review it.
provide review.
Is that
It's a new
for-
application.
Is that for every application though? Because any
'Cause it's
disturbance
an
we're doing is
aquifer.
more than 200 feet away from any wetland area. I just don't understand.
It's the Aquifer Protection District, I believe that is
I'm
the,
trying to find that. I looked quickly and I didn't. I was.
and I did not bring my computer, usually I bring my computer so I can control F.
And I do believe that, I don't have the correspondence to prove it, but I do believe that Mr. West months ago reached out to the River Advisory Commission to see whether they had jurisdiction over this or they had any comment on it, one or the other or both. And I don't know that they had anything to say, but
I don't
I
think
don't
they did.
remember, yeah.
he probably should have submitted something if he did that.
I think the plan looks great.
thank you. We put
I'd
a
approve
lot
it
of-
right now.
A lot of work into it, and
I might be wrong.
we went back substantially from what was approved.
You did? Perfect.
It's in the subdivision red.
I have one more comment after you've done that.
Oh, it's the stream. No,
Two.
sorry, it's the stream. Actually, Blair might have mentioned that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep. Ms. Bowman.
So, the reference to the Conservation Commission, just so everybody knows, the Stream Protection Overlay District, which I believe was voted through last year. Under number 5, the administration, the last paragraph, regards the administration and, planning board shall oversee when applications regarding this article are made to the Nottingham. Oh, there we go. When applications regarding this article are made to the Nottingham Zoning Board of Adjustment, all applications shall also be referred to the Nottingham Conservation Commission for review and comment prior to the zoning board hearing. So that would require, so that's saying if a variance, right, because we don't have a special permit, if a variance was required from one of the prescribed setbacks to the zoning board, Nottingham Conservation Commission review is required. So it does not say,
I guess what I would recommend is, since it is shoreland and it does have to go get the local river advisory committee's, chance for input from them, the
Is
board
there
can,
any
the
input
board
from them
can,
from the last one?
again,
I don't think we got
I'm sure
that.
there was.
Nobody can find anything?
we didn't get to that.
But it's a new application, so I didn't go back through and pull up all the details, so I would just recommend that even if it's not required, we can request, review and comment by the Conservation Commission. That way and the applicant does not need to be present, they have all the materials that speak for themselves, they're allowed to provide more information, and we can, just get it back. Again, it's procedural, and I think it's a, best practice.
Is your take too that if Mark did reach out to local river advisory committee regarding this 3-lot application, that should also be sufficient to just provide that communication? We obviously haven't seen it, so that's I think the problem.
Yeah, I think, so we formally would have
We're not
to
gonna
just reach
require you
out.
to initiate new,
We would formally reach out to the LRAC and send, which is Lamprey River, in this case, so we would reach out to them and advise that we have an application before us. We would send them the link to the documents and just request that they provide, comment if they, any, and we'd give them a date requesting it back by, so that,
I'd suggest too, if we could include the applicant's consultant on that, because with many state permits, it is actually under the purview of the applicant that they can communicate with the local river advisory committee. Granted, the LRAC will always send it to, say, AOT, if it's an AOT permit. That if we do send that request, that maybe, you can ask them essentially to, if there is material that they've reviewed and they provided some sort of feedback, just have them confirm if this is still accurate. So that we're not asking them to put fresh eyes on it if this is the application, the layout that they looked at.
So
It will satisfy both.
if I heard correctly, you folks will be reaching out to the River Commission.
we'll send them a request for comment,
And
yeah.
if we could be copied in that, as the Vice Chair said, and Mark West as well.
I think that makes sense, because
Yeah.
they've already had some conversations with them.
So,
I think we can CC that person if we have their contact information.
Ms. Moody said that next Monday, the Conservation Commission is meeting. What I would like to do is just permission to remove the grading aspects of this and submit plans for them for Monday, or hand deliver them to the office. So, is it proper for me to address?
Yeah, we try to keep everything forward, but yeah, so I would say
Liaise with the town.
submit it back through.
Because I wanna
Electronic
see-
should be fine in
Yeah.
that case,
I want them to see this removed, because
Right.
that's what we've discussed,
Yep.
so.
Yep.
Because we really are going to try to get them to minimize the disturbance here, so they'll have a revision to this and the other comments that were made about the frontage labeling and
Yeah.
my mistake of the contiguous area.
Yeah, the well, the contiguous
And the
area,
well.
and that, so I
Yep.
think there's some tweaks, if you wanna get them done at a time,
Yep.
I think that's,
I just want them to review the more up-to-date and accurate what we're talking about.
And ultimately, it's gonna be what you seek final approval on anyway, so.
Right.
yeah.
That's exactly right. Okay, well, I hope for approval tonight, I guess we're coming back. Anything to do anyway?
yeah, so,
April 12th.
Nor do
is there any
we.
further comment from the board before we move for continuance?
Do you wanna open up to the public?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. This is a public hearing. So we welcome input from the public specific to this case. Anybody speaking for can come up first. Anybody speaking against or just has general questions, come up after. I just ask that you come up to the table, state your name and address, and address anything towards the board, not towards the applicant directly. Anybody that would like to come up, going once? Speak for, against, either or? Okay. Public hearing is closed. We opened it 8:27, close it at 8:29. Okay. So our next meeting would be in April, April 12th, for business purposes. Was there a motion from anybody?
Does the 12th work? You just want the next available date?
That's the next available for
12th?
us.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And if for some reason it doesn't, you can always email ahead of time.
And we always do, if there's new deliverables, we ask that they be 1 week prior at latest.
The crocuses will be up by then.
So I'll move to continue case number 23-002 SUB to April 12th at 7 PM.
Deliverables by the 5th is the only thing,
I'll second.
by the 5th.
By the second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Anderson, and second by Ms. Mooney, and if I understand the motion correctly, because there was some comment afterwards, we're continuing the case to April 12th, 2023 at 7 PM with deliverables by April 5th at the latest. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion carries 7-0.
Just one last question, Mr. Chairman, if I might. Everything else looks good? Nothing else we're gonna have to do when you come back?
The only other thing I think I mentioned was, you can wait till next week and see what the warrant article does, or just add it on there now, is that
Yeah.
25-foot notice or vegetative buffer around the
Yeah.
wetlands.
So it won't be on the plans that we give to the Concom, because it's not,
Right.
but it may go south.
You'll know by the end of next week.
Yeah, I get a feeling most people will vote for it though, right?
Who knows?
You don't-
Who knows?
We have a good track record, but
Yeah.
We'll
Okay, well, it was nice to see you again.
thank you.
Have a good night.
You as well. Next item on the agenda is case 23003 LLA Kung Food LLC on Old Turnpike and 2 Mary Hill Road. The application from Kung Food LLC requesting planning board approval of a lot line adjustment in the commercial industrial zone of Nottingham, New Hampshire between properties identified as tax map number 4, lots number 2 and 2-1. Is there anybody here that'd like to speak towards this?
Obviously.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Sam Cowell. I work for the Debate Group, and we put together this lot line adjustment plan between tax map 4, lot 2-1, and tax map 4, lot 2. So the proposed lot line adjustment shifts the lot line between these two parcels 50 feet this way, which ends up being a total of 0.365 acres. That additional 0.365 acres gets added to lot 2-1 and subtracted from lot 2. Lot 2-1, originally 2 acres, goes to 2.365. Lot 2 is 34 acres and goes down to 33.6. And the whole reason behind the lot line adjustment is, so this development, this site plan went before you guys, not sure how recently now, a few months, maybe a year at this point. It's the wedding venue at the barn at Mary Hill. So the proposed septic design is rather large for the wedding venue. So,
Just hit the second sheet.
so the second sheet is just the topographic lot line adjustment. So as you can see, the site slopes down this way. So the proposed septic, we have over in this region put it there not only because it's downslope of the site to take advantage of gravity and not having a pump, but also to preserve the historic and aesthetic value of the site. So where we propose the septic wouldn't disturb any of the stone walls or large trees, which the client really wants to keep because it's a wedding venue and it is aesthetically pleasing. So just 50 feet and solely because of the proposed septic system.
Thank you. Mr. Haney, you had a chance to review the application. I believe, any comment towards completeness at all?
No, it appears fine. No waivers, no additional permits, and, you know, it is a lot line adjustment. There isn't necessarily as much, information to review typically. So, you know, it's kind of at the board's discretion on that one.
Okay.
I'm glad you explained why. I was curious. It did look like it was probably because of the septic, since it does sort of creep into that a little bit, but, yeah, I think that just kind of clarifies things. And I point that out, so there was really no comments, you know, things to consider. So, it does appear to be complete and not a BRI.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we consider, case number 23-003 LLA as complete.
Second?
That's a motion by Mr. McKinnon and a second by Ms. Mooney to accept the application as complete. Any further discussion on that part? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries 7-0. All right, now
Are
we,
you required to do DRI? What's it
Yeah, I
say?
said that, but I'm
Correct.
kind of wondering that.
we can, why not?
I'll do it just to be safe, and I don't know. I'll make a motion that case number 23-003 LLA is not a development of regional impact.
Second.
That's a motion by Mr. McKinnon, second by Mr. Anderson, that this is not a development of regional impact. Any, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion carries 7-0 as well. All right, so now we can get into the further discussion. Before we bring it back to the board, was there anything else beyond your initial presentation that you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. Kung Fu LLC owns both lots too, so it's mutually,
Beneficial.
it's pretty easy for them to
Yep.
take some land from one and add to another.
And-
But
and I
no, I
believe-
don't think I have anything else to say.
And I believe while the applicant was here for that, I believe they mentioned that their hope and desire was to acquire that lot and then potentially do something like this to,
Right.
you know, to eliminate that or make it a little bit more conforming, so. It looks like you're taking a lot that technically might be a non-conforming lot based on usage, making it larger, which means more conforming, helping that, adding that setback area for the septic, I think is a good idea. The only thing that's probably not shown on this plan is obviously the different site condition being the parking area that's now been, done, unless that's the edge of approximate gravel. Is that supposed to be the full parking area?
No, that's not the proposed full parking
Yeah,
area.
this isn't
I'm
proposed.
not entirely sure how much they've done on site.
Quite a bit.
Okay. But yeah.
That area's, I drove by, they've got material stockpiled for the parking, they just haven't shaped it yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so some of this is obviously just outdated with,
Yeah, this is more of so an existing condition,
right.
Do we
semi-updated.
need to know that information when we're just looking for a lot line adjustment?
No, I just, if it gets, put on file, then I think might be.
It was more so
better
because
practice
there's
to
some
have.
stuff that was shown as like new stuff, but then some
Where
was
it is.
existing, so it was
So the,
a snapshot in time.
the nitrate loading easement, it's still gonna have a nitrate loading easement on the abutting parcel.
Yep.
So they didn't wanna try to adjust it all the way over to there to just eliminate that.
No, I think just because that was already in place, they thought that they would take advantage of that and just shift the lot line instead.
And then sometimes the other thing we require on, lot line adjustments is making sure that the existing lot is still a buildable lot, that we're not creating a non-buildable lot, given the size of this area that's being proposed, and then the overall size of the parent parcel, or the contributing parcel. You know, I don't think that's, I wouldn't think that would be necessary on this one.
Only one thing. The only thing I'll add, and it can be something that's added to the plan at the end, is, the new lot line being 317 feet is just technically, it would need to have a pin thrown in the middle, just because we have a limit of 300 feet between monuments. So the only comment there would be just throw, doesn't have to be in the middle, you could, if there's some more convenient location, but, an intermediate iron pin somewhere on there on the final plan.
Okay.
Yep. Otherwise, there would be a waiver needed, but I think it makes sense just to throw a pin in.
Okay.
Yeah, and to that point, on the plans, you know, it's flagged that, you know, concrete, granite bound to be set on the back corner. It doesn't specify that on the front corner,
Oh, yeah, it's shown, but
so I don't know if that's supposed to be, that should be just marked as a granite bound as well. Do you see which one I'm talking about? On Route 4, that bottom corner there.
looks like the line works there, or the block is there, just not text to that nature.
Yep. It should be granite bounds, not concrete. So is there any further discussion by the board?
Anything concrete is good as DOT.
Oh,
They love concrete. 20 years from now, it disintegrates. No, I don't have anything else.
Granite doesn't have that problem.
Is this showing, commercial industrial on one side and then residential architectural on the other? Or is that,
What do you
It
want?
is,
This, this part here is commercial,
okay,
and that
okay.
part is agricultural.
so on sheet 2, up in the parcel overview at the top right, there's that line, dividing line that shows residential, agricultural, commercial, industrial. Yes, we have split zoning, so it's about 1,000 feet for Route 4 is commercial, industrial, and then beyond that is the res ag district, so. For-
So this is like sideways, this would be sideways over here? A little map on the top?
Nope,
No?
Same orientation.
same orientation, yeah.
You've got
So-
Mary Hill here.
So you don't see it on the plan because the lot 4, 2-1 is right at the bottom corner, so it's nowhere near that line. The parent parcel.
Oh, it's up
splits
here?
The zone.
Is that what you're saying?
No, it's beyond, it's well beyond it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, yep. Is there any further comment, questions?
Public.
Oh, yep. Forget about that. It is a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing for comment. Anybody for, against, or has questions about this application, please step forward, and because the acoustics in here are poor, please come to the desk and state your name.
Closed.
So that was opened at 8:41 PM, going once, going twice. Nobody is come forward, so we will close the public hearing at 8:42 PM. Any further discussion by the board? If not, I think a motion is in order.
I'll make a motion to approve case number 23-003 LLA, with standard conditions, plus a requirement for, an additional iron pin along the proposed lot line to meet the 300-foot or less requirement in the subdivision regulations, and adding annotation to the front granite bound on Route 4, just to specify it is a new granite bound to be installed, same as the one in the rear, so.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. McKinnon, a second by Ms. Mooney, to approve with conditions. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? No. So motion carries, 6 yeas, 1 nay. There you go. All set?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll just discuss finding as a fact on this. So it's a minor lot line adjustment, making it one lot more conforming with zoning, and it seems to meet our zoning and subdivision regulations and the intent.
Simple.
There we go. Next on the agenda, we had some town council responses to a couple of different documents that went out in email to everybody. Normally, the way I look at those is if there are edits proposed by the town council, we send them on to the applicant, request that they make the edits. If there's questions from town council or something requiring third-party review, we could potentially look at that. I think one of them with drainage easements mentioned potentially going back to the town engineer, which I thought we already had done, so before we do that, we'll review to make sure that we're not duplicating an effort. So those two cases were 20-003 SUB DeBerto on Mitchell Road and 22-014 SUB Falzone, Stevens Hill Road. Does the board have any other comment on those? Updated information regarding a case we were notified of as the town, as we're butters, was a Deerfield subdivision on 206 Nottingham Road in Deerfield, New Hampshire. We discussed this at the last or 2 meetings ago. We had very little notification of it before it came before us. We didn't have plans or anything. Mr. Haney, I think you got a copy of the plan since, and it was, I think, a 3-lot subdivision that they were looking at with no proposed impact to the land that's in Nottingham and nothing proposed for future expansion that I'm aware of. So they'd come, the same tax map, it'd come before us as, I think, conceptuals or design reviews at one point. But the big holdback was the lots were being proposed in Nottingham, but the only access was through Deerfield. There's gonna be a new private road through Deerfield. So there was quite a bit of.
Cause they wanted the house to be on Nottingham land, everything else was in Deerfield.
Right. Yep, so it seems like they pulled back on that and are proposing just houses in Deerfield. So if the board has comment, I can definitely draft something and send it on, or we can ask Mr. Haney to send something on, you know,
No comment.
but at this scope. You know, unless there's future expansion planned or any indication that there is, then fine with letting Deerfield handle their own case. Okay. Alana had provided us the DES and the butter notifications for us to look at. I don't think there's anything in there for us to necessarily take action on at this time as a board, so if anybody has comment on that, please let me know. If not, we'll keep moving forward.
I think with those going forward is like, unless it's wetland related, it's more so just to check that, make sure somebody's applying for the necessary permit under the regulations, right?
Yeah,
That's
we
the
can,
intent there.
I think you and we can take a look at it and then come up with a better workflow to make sure that,
I think it's good to have a check there to make sure somebody's not skirting a permit somehow. It does happen at the state level. They don't, their job isn't to follow up with every state or every town, so, yep.
public comment, this is the time of night where we open the floor to the public to come before us and ask us questions, talk about anything as long as it's not case specific. Nobody here tonight, so we'll move on. Approval of minutes, we have 3 sets. I had some minor edits, I can read those in, but if anybody else has some, we can, please speak up.
For January 25th, on line 29, there needed to be a correction for the word order, and I have it written down, so I can give that to you. Also, the indications in bold, there are 4 of them, they need to be removed because they were just comments to the other members of the board for their inputs. February 8th minutes, my edits are in red and also in strikeout, so obviously those need to be updated before they get posted.
So my edits, I'm just gonna tackle all 3. One edit for the minutes of January 11th, and Alana, I have it printed, I can email them to you. Line 261, just correct the date to January 25th, 2023. Minutes of January 25th, Line 138, I think it's something attributed to me, but it was Mr. Moran, it was just a clarification. And I went back and double checked the YouTube just to make sure. It was, where is that? Sorry, the line was just talking about, the question that came up about making improvements on Jansen Trail. The town doesn't have, the town itself doesn't have standards for existing roads. Line 162, I recommend amending that to, read as, where it says he reported that they did not do a hydrogeological study because the board had voted that it was not required. It actually should read as, after hydrogeological study, because the board had discussed this and had not required one. And I went back into the minutes of October 26th for the reference on that, just to make sure that we didn't actually have a vote, we discussed it. And then the last thing on those sets of minutes for January 25th is, maybe it wasn't that date, I'm sorry.
Was it about the iron pins and the?
No, I'm sorry. So that's it for January 25th. Stepping back to January 11th, the only other general comment is where we went into non-public, just to reflect that it was a roll call vote to enter, to seal minutes, and to end it. That was a roll call as required by the RSA. In the minutes of February 8th, I've got 4 edits. Line 40, changed agency to town. Line 49 and 50, replace where it says Mr. Beal responded that this other subdivision does too, is required to provide the easement he indicated. Instead, it's gonna just read as Mr. Beal indicated and start on to that second sentence. Read that fully for anybody that wants to hear it.
You can just give it to her, can't you?
I can, yeah. In line 57, last edit is add as it is currently a designated scenic road after improve the road. That was it for me. And Alana, I'll send those to you. I've got them typed up. Or I can hand it to you. Okay.
So I move that we accept the minutes of January 11th, 2023, January 25th, 2023, and February 8th, 2023, as amended.
Second.
That's a motion by Ms. Mooney, a second by Ms. Anderson to accept the minutes of January 11th, January 25th, and February 8th, 2023, as amended. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Staff board updates. We'll just go around the table. Mr. Davies.
All set.
Been great working with you all, and we'll see what the next venture is. I'll probably bump into some of you.
Yeah, so Mr. Anderson's
Good luck.
referring to, he did not sign up to run. His term is up this year, and he did not elect to run again, and nobody signed his name for him, so. I think what he's volunteering for, subcommittees and all the other things, but thank you on behalf of all of us for, all your time here and commitment to the town, and I know you're still committed to the town in other ways, on other committees, the building, evaluation being a very big one of them, so thank you for everything you've done and are continuing to do.
Select board, okay, our new town administrator will be starting on the 20th, Ellen White, so we're excited about that. That'll be on Monday. She's finishing up her term in Freedom after they do their election, so that's why she's starting after election time. The board's still going over many different town facility problems. We had another furnace that was going. It's just never
Sabotage.
it's a never-ending battle with maintenance, which is coming to these buildings and succumb to them. So hopefully we'll have money enough to fix things that need to be done. You know, this work that needs to be done. You know, I think over at the library too, that stuff we have to fix, and just the mounting costs. And, you know, we're all gearing up for election day. Let's hope for a nice turnout. So everybody, it's Tuesday. You got from 7 AM to 7 PM, plenty of time to stop by and vote. It's your money. Come vote on what you think we should spend it for.
And there's a lot of people running this year, so
Yeah.
research.
Yep, do your due diligence on who you wanna vote for, but it is what it is. And we have 2 new members that'll be joining the Board of Selectmen. So we'll see how that, turns out and who they are.
Appreciate that, thanks for the update on that. Thanks for the reminder about elections. Okay.
Nothing for me, get out and vote.
I attended the virtual webinar from NHMA, I think it was, I put it on, now I forget already. I think Ms. Anderson was also in attendance. And I sent out, and Alana distributed it to the planning board and ZBA. All those, the planning board handbook, the zoning board handbook, they've been updated. If you haven't looked at them, they're really beneficial to look at. And at minimum, definitely look at the RSA changes for this year. So there's a couple that strongly impact us, as are referred to tonight. One is the requirement to have findings of fact. So we don't necessarily have a document for it. We can think about that as a board, or at least put it on all our stuff to make sure that we do it. With approvals, it's one of those things that you should do it. With any denials, you definitely do it, because that's what's gonna get appealed, and if you don't have a findings of fact, they may just look at the minutes and then just, they're gonna err or remand it back, potentially to the board, or approve it. So, one more step for us is, so findings of fact. The other thing that I took away from it is a tightening of, on applications. So we've been kind of, land use boards have always had the opportunity to like, accept an application as complete and then, you know, get things through waivers afterwards or whatever. The way the RSA is reading now is, if it's not complete, if the waivers aren't there, everything else, and Charlene, Blair, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way it was stated, if those items aren't there, you should not accept the application as complete.
So what happens if there's an active application, design changes are made that require, that then force a waiver?
That's,
Is
I
that
think
different?
that is through the flow, but
Okay.
upon initial presentation, if it doesn't meet the town's guidelines for what is a complete application, we shouldn't be accepting them, so,
Without that waiver.
without all the appropriate documentation, waivers and whatever.
Is there any
else.
guidance, so say we get materials 2 weeks ahead of time, or initial materials, or however far in advance? What's the, obviously it's a little different, we don't have a full-time planner who really gets into nuts and bolts, we have Blair, but, you know, there's time's limited ahead of time. Be allowed to provide feedback if somebody, I mean, obviously it's difficult, right, because you're not supposed to have feedback, but if something is very clear that, oh, that's a waiver item, is that feedback you're allowed to give to an applicant?
I think it depends on where it's coming from, so like, obviously, when the land use clerk accepts an application on behalf of an applicant, for the town, there's always a kind of look-through of it and what they presented, provided to us. Ultimately, it's always upon the applicant to comply with the regulations, so, you know, I get that sounds like just passing, like, we're saying, oh, it's not our problem. So ultimately, it goes back to, it's the applicant's job to do it. We can, the town will look at it, if the planner reviews it and has comment, I think normally they do send that back to the applicant in advance. But the board really shouldn't be, we shouldn't be sending any kind of communication back to the applicant.
But they could bring, Blair could get back to them, and that same day, they could bring with them, say, a new waiver request, and as long as it's handed to the board has the option to review that before voting on completeness, in theory. There's nothing
If
that
it's
precludes.
complete at that point,
Yes,
it's
say there's
coming
a,
in with the application.
No, he's saying, Mr. McKinnon's indicating that, say we get the applications and it's mostly complete, but we realize during staff review of it, that they probably should have requested a waiver for 1 or 2 items. The applicant is aware of that, and they bring it at the hearing night, so that we can then act on the application and those waivers
And we don't have to, we have the option to, because
Yeah.
the board reserves the right to say, well, we need time to think about it.
Yep.
And then we might say, we're not going to entertain a vote, but we could, if they bring that with them, so.
So they can like cure a mistake by bringing something to the,
It's kinda like, we've done in meetings where like, hey, you need to write a waiver request, and a guy jots it on a piece of paper. I mean, that's legal.
I have to be up at 4:30 in the morning, so.
Yeah.
We're up
Good night, everybody.
Appreciate it, John.
Good night, John.
So, those are the two biggest takeaways of it from me, that I got out of it. Again, I know it was a lot of information in that email. Please just take a look at it, especially the planning board handbook and then the updates to the RSA. You can watch the recording, I think it's there too, but, I'd probably not recommend that.
Not the best instructors.
Yeah, presentation wasn't superb. And then Mr. Moran already indicated voting day is next, Tuesday, so,
A lot of warrant articles to read up on.
yep, a lot of things to educate yourself on and
The town reports are over there in that white box if anybody wants to pick one up.
love to. I think that's it for me.
At the latest, select board meeting, we had two, representatives from the Conservation Commission, Dallas Huggins and, Kristen Lamb, talked to members of the select board about trying to find an alternative solution for rats and rodents getting into the building. The, technique that they have contracted for are these black boxes that contain rodenticide, but they aren't instant kills. So the rats and mice go in, they eat the poison, they leave the box, and they're preyed upon by wildlife, owls, hawks, fox,
And
coyotes,
pets.
and pets. And so the select board charged these two ladies and the commission for researching alternative solutions to these black boxes, which cost $6,000 a year, and all the company does is just provide the poison. Recently, in the Boston Globe, there was an incidence of a female bald eagle that had been sort of a pet in a community for the last 8 years, and she died and perished from rodenticide. So it's gotten recent publicity about, let's do something that's a little bit more nature-friendly.
We've got these lids, they crawl in.
And they
They
drown?
They drop into the bucket
Uh-huh,
alive.
yeah,
And then you can take the bucket and do with
Yeah.
it what you want, but there's no pesticides in
yeah.
it.
I've seen the ones with the pail of water. You put bait,
Oh, right,
and they
right,
crawl
right.
and they drown.
Yeah, so I guess you could put water in the bucket.
Be a town hall cat.
Yeah,
just
town
get a
hall
cat, it's literally the best thing in the world.
Mouser.
A town hall
Good
It's the
mouser.
only thing that's effective.
Alana, the cat can live in your office.
And I guess part of the building committee, I'm sure, is looking for any holes in the building that they can access, but yes, it's like Ms. Mooney said, it's
Plus they can't
you know,
have-
you basically end up creating a bigger problem because you have pests and then you end up killing their predators unintentionally or pets.
Yeah.
Unintentionally, so then obviously the rodents, then they got the run of the place. So there are better options out there, so thank you for bringing that up.
That's it.
Oh, no, I'm good, I'm all set.
Us, I got to go to a Stratford Regional Planning Commission, and I took notes. So, they have a position open for a senior planner, so if you know of anybody, SRPC is hiring. So at the commission, meeting, they talked about the regional housing plan, so that right now is open for public comment until March 14th. And then they'll take the public comment and integrate it into the housing plan. I think they're thinking maybe like, April, May to have that completed. So that is where the progress is on that. And then this commission meeting was really roundtable discussion to help, SRPC develop their next, strategic plan. So they asked every community for kind of what some of the top priorities were, as far as planning, what initiatives are going on in the town, and then also any resource needs where SRPC can help. So I had reached out to Ed, because unfortunately I wasn't at the last planning board meeting to ask you all. And so I reached out to Ed with some of my ideas, and he had provided some input as well. So we submitted our top priorities, being from the planning board, the master plan, and any other land use regulation updates, review of impact fees that we see that are some of the top priorities, as well as anything that supports the above, the regulations and defers costs, and then helping small towns. And I'll just say, it was interesting to hear from the other small towns that they had a lot of the same needs. Anything that's helping small towns deal with the growing influx of people in construction, although that was across the board. And then water resource planning, both quantity and quality, and then safe travel on Route 4, which we've discussed. And then for initiatives, I just shared with them, with, you know, the Marston build-out that the town's been working on for several years, and then also what just happened with the town infrastructure needs, and looking at that and putting together a plan. And then for SRP support, that we would like beyond what we currently receive is possibly a water resource planning, a step-by-step guide to help set up and accommodate for remote attendance, if they can do that. And then a monthly snapshot for the commissioners to communicate what's happening at SRPC. So my thought there was, if they could like send out a snapshot to us every month or something that I can just forward on to you, to make it easier for kind of just so you're aware of like everything that they're working on, because I'm not able to attend all the meetings. But, so that's the update.
Thank you.
Okay, quick question on what you updated on.
Yeah.
What was the thing you said about construction?
So, it seems like it was construction, meaning development.
Okay,
I
okay,
used the word construction, but it was
Okay.
development
yeah. Towns are seeing an influx of development.
across, through the whole,
It's coming from Concord, it's coming from the seacoast.
yeah.
It's gotta be coming from all over because,
Yeah.
I mean,
We're getting
between
sandwiched right now.
here in Stratford where I work, yeah, everybody's seeing a ton. It's
Yeah.
quite overwhelming. Okay, cool.
And then what's happening in Portsmouth and how everything that's happening in Portsmouth is just like, kind of.
Yeah, I have a feeling that the Portsmouth, Dover, Rochester is gonna be one big city here. Something, you know.
Urban sprawl.
You get the other part of it with the advent of remote working. I think you saw a lot of people leave cities and go into more rural areas, you know, not just here, but even further north than us.
I think you saw a lot of early retirements too. I don't know that we would be experiencing that, but I think we probably did see some exodus.
Well-
Florida and Texas are just blowing up right now. You know?
The other thing that they did say too is like, so they're collecting data on, from the towns and the communities, like, where would you put in EV charging station if you were to put one? So DOT's kind of working on identifying like potential sites, so.
They're looking at the power grid too, right? Because you need to be able to meet the demands of this.
Yeah.
There's certain places you can put them and certain places you can't put them.
Yeah.
They need the land for it, but,
My guess is the park and ride on 4202 might be a spot.
yeah, that's what they're focusing on.
I think that's with the power part, you know, that you mentioned, I think there's a substation over there or something too, so.
Regarding the development though, I recently seen something about coming from Massachusetts, that there's such an influx coming to New Hampshire from Mass, that they're concerned about their economy because they're losing, you know, people are just coming here.
Interesting.
And unless sometimes they're attracting people to move from the city north, so it's kind of like you're just pulling from one thing and then hoping it
Yeah.
replenishes itself, but.
Two things. One is just to piggyback on what Charlie was saying. You were talking about a snapshot. I don't think this is going to address that, but if you are interested, SRPC puts out like I think it's called SRPC Tidbits or something. It's a newsletter. I don't know if any of you are not subscribed to it, it's always a good bit of information.
Yeah, it's good.
It's more, just a little bit of fun stuff in there too, like
Yeah.
just kind of interesting things. So that's just a suggestion. If you want to sign up for that, you can go to the town or go to the SRPC website. But I think that's a good idea. I think that is actually a good thing to forward on to people if Jen and them want to do that. The only other thing I wanted to add is a bit related to this board. Myself and another gentleman in the office, Stephen, will be spearheading the update to Nottingham's hazard mitigation plan. This is done every 5 years. A high-level overview is that your hazard mitigation plan looks at your community, identifies vulnerable sites and areas, so like public service buildings, hospitals, maybe like
The dump?
assisted living places.
A local dump?
No, well, yeah,
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Facilities, I don't know.
well, like,
Facility.
Not to joke, but I mean, it is true, because it is a facility that you think about it, if it gets closed or blocked for more than a week,
yeah.
what happens?
Yeah. So the different facilities that are potentially vulnerable, what you're vulnerable from, what type of hazards, right? Flooding, hurricanes, extreme temperatures, either hot or cold, things like that. So there's a whole list of them that we look at. And then we look at, well, what are your mitigation opportunities and options for these things? Some are soft ones, like pamphlets that make people aware of what they can do if there is a hurricane or something like that. And then there's more construction-related ones, like fixing a culvert where flooding it might happen. So that's a nutshell what the project is. There's between 3 and 5 meetings, and Stephen will be handling those. I'll be handling the writing of the plan. I'm making you all aware because as volunteers of this board, we're usually looking for a representative from different boards, whether it's Conservation Commission, whether it's Planning Board. I do like to only have one per board, so if you wanted to volunteer, like maybe you would do it from like Conservation, if somebody else wanted to do it from this board. I'm only just calling you out because I know you sit on 2 boards, but it would be the preference, and we could do that because you're representing a Conservation board as opposed to the Planning Board. Because you get into the issue of like open meeting law, if you have a couple of people from one board, you don't want to,
Yep.
you don't want to even get close to it, just ignore it. So just, if anybody is thinking about getting more involved in your community, this is an opportunity. Chief, your fire chief is the emergency management director, and he will be reaching out to you guys as well as all other boards and commissions and town staff in the coming week. We just had the kickoff meeting between the 3 of us this morning.
Did we end up doing the culvert, the town, end up doing a culvert inventory at some point in the last couple of years? I know at one point there was a proposal to allow for a grant for it at town meeting, and it got shot down.
Well, it
Which I
failed
thought
and
we-
then it came
I thought we
back.
paid, so then I think the town paid for it.
To do the culvert inventory,
I think SRPC would have been the one that did that.
I,
Obviously, that, when you mentioned culvert, that's what triggered my,
sure, yeah.
I would reach
That
out
would
to,
be-
yeah, so I'd reach out to Sean, cause there was like a $30,000, and then there was some sort of grant thing that, I think it ended up, it failed the first time, but then there was it got restructured as a grant refund, like it was, the town had to spend the money, but it was gonna be refunded via like some sort of grant system.
Yeah,
So, I don't know, yeah, I don't know if SRPC or if it was through DES, but Sean at DPW, yeah, was supposed to maintain, that was it was last.
so if we don't have one of those, I would think that that'd be part, to be included in that mitigation plan of, if we don't even know where all the culverts are, what size they are, what condition they are, how do we mitigate for future things or prepare for that? when-
The asset.
You'll know if they're too small. You know,
Well, we've already seen that this year, so.
you'll have some
Or
problems.
if they are properly sized, but they are old and deteriorate and they fall apart like happened a couple times.
Yeah, when you have the metal ones, they completely erode at the bottom, and it does not take long at all. And sometimes, there's a misconception about undersized culverts, because, they're originally sized for like a 100-year storm, and sometimes what we're seeing is 100-year storms within like a deluge, within like an hour or 2, and then these things get overwhelmed. It doesn't necessarily mean they're undersized, it's just,
12-hour 100-year storm, not a 24-hour 100.
yes, exactly, yes. The modeling has different options. So, anyways, this will be happening. Keep an eye out if you are interested in participating. Those that email will be going shortly.
Alright.
And like I said, the commitment is not that long. It's 3 or 4 meetings, maybe 5.
we'll know next week whether or not we're dues paying members of SRPC, and once that happens, if approved, then we will be reaching out to say, hey, what else can we get out of it?
Thank you for that. It really meant a lot to.
Give us more.
And SRPC as a whole, so to all of you that have supported this, and I know you were a big champion of it, but it really does mean a lot for us, and we don't want that to go unnoticed.
Lana, do you have anything for us? Nothing? Okay. All right, so our next meeting is, March 22nd. Again, that's the no business. It'll be election of officers, reviewing the bylaws. So if you could send those out again before that meeting, I think it's just our bylaws and rules of procedure, for us to re-review and approve, adopt. That'd be great. Any additional thing from anybody before we adjourn? No? All right. We are adjourned. It is 9:14. Thank you, everybody.
Sherry, I sent that